Assalamualaikum and good evening Puan Siti Noor binti Adnan. My name is Noor Amiratul Atira binti Nabi Kamal. My matric card number is 10 DPM 19F2065. We are from group 7, like to play a role about scenario 2. When we think about communication, we most often focus on how we exchange information using words. Differences in non-verbal communication between culture arise as the result of how different people interpret their social interaction around the world. Those wishing to work in international companies should be aware of culture variance in non-verbal communication. While verbal communication is important to human, a thousand of years before, humans rely on non-verbal communication for a developed capability to communication with words. Non-verbal communication is a signal to allow us to understand through feelings. With the help of face expression, gesture, and body posture, people who can show many emotions and meanings, there are many signs of non-verbal communication, which we can understood. Different culture use different kind of body posture. For example, shake hands, kissing, hugging, and etc. This hemispheric distinction has been clearly evidenced as the people who suffer trauma to right side of their brain lose the ability to recognize face expression but can still process verbal communication. Conversely, to people who left hemisphere of the brain is damaged, they lose ability to speak, read, understand language. In terms of content, non-verbal communication tends to the work of communicating emotions more than verbal. Finally, whereas we are human are unique in our capability to abstract and extend space and time using verbal symbols, we are not only creatures and engaged in non-verbal communication. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mugudan son of Arunasalam. My metric number is 10 DPM 19F2059. Today we are going to see the difference between verbal and non-verbal. As you all recall from our introductory chapter, a channel is the sensory route on which message travels. Non-verbal communication, on the other hand, can be taken in by all five of our senses. Non-verbal communication is a system of non-verbal symbols, signs, codes used to send messages with a high degree of accuracy that a greater or lesser extent alienated and is independent of the psychological and psychosocial personality traits. Touch is an especially powerful form of non-verbal communication that we will discuss in this chapter. To further define non-verbal communication, we need to distinguish between vocal and verbal aspects of communication. Verbal and non-verbal communication includes both vocal and non-vocal elements, which is the vocalized but verbal part of spoken message, such as speaking rate, volume, and pitch. Non-vocal elements of verbal communication include the use of unspoken symbols to convey the meaning. Non-verbal communication is also useful in a quiet situation where verbal communication would be disturbing. You may use a gesture to signal. For an example, to a friend that you are ready to leave the library. Crowded or loud places can also impede verbal communication and lead people to rely more on non-verbal messages. Non-verbal communication can be used to influence people in a variety of ways, but the most common way is through deception. Deception is typically thought of as the intentional act of altering information to influence another person. Since most of us believe that non-verbal communication is more credible than verbal communication, but if a person is from another culture who is guided by a different set of rules, our interpretation of the visual behavior may be quite wrong. Understanding a culture differences in non-verbal behavior is the first step of communication.
Hi, my name is Malandas, son of Rajaratnam. My metric card number is 10 DPM 19F2053. Today I want to talk about methods of non-verbal communication among people. This study aimed at identifying non-verbal language barriers to effective interactual face-to-face communication, their types and root causes, and discussion their impact on our ways of exchanging messages and making people, groups, governments, and nations aware of importance of recognizing and learning them in order to reduce or limit them and make recommendations based on their study result for improvising the effectiveness of intellectual communication. Because understanding nonverbal barriers to effective intellectual communication of various cultures is essential due to the current trend of globalization. In today's globalized world, is it essential to build a relationship between people by using body language behaviors as a bridge of communication in politics, tourism, business, negotiation, hospitals, religions, education, and the military? At the same time, body language can act as a barrier wall or challenge the separates and provides people from different culture exchange a simple, clear, and accurate non-verbal message, because misreading body language may cause misunderstanding of the non-verbal message that lead to destroying relationship between people. Therefore, the most important questions are: how can communication with people from another culture who speak different language successfully? Moreover, how to bridge the gap of communication between people in different intellectual communication situations in order to have a mutual understanding in a culture diverse world. Understanding what people mean through their body language can be even challenging. Even simple handshake can be vary from culture to culture. The study focused only on the non-verbal language body language barriers to the effective intellectual communication. A qualitative methodology was chosen as the best suited analyze the in-depth communication process, and the meaning of the body language is intellectual communication. The paper also presents research aiming to explore factors which cause non-verbal language barriers in face-to-face communication in real life, given examples about the effect of non-verbal language barriers on the intellectual communication process, and discuss the strategies of reducing or overcoming the non-verbal language barrier to effective intellectual communication. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Navine, son of Velmurugan. I am from class DPM 4B. My metric number 10 DPM 19F2031. Today I want to tell about type of nonverbal behavior or codes. One reason that nonverbal communication is so rich with information is that humans use so many different aspects of behavior, appearance, and environment to convey meaning. Scholars call the different meaning used for transmitting information nonverbal communication codes. The 7 general codes for nonverbal communication are kinesis, vocalisis, prosmexis, eptasis, chronomexis, physical appearance, artifacts, and environment. The culture pattern embedded in nonverbal codes should be used not as stereotypes for all members of particular cultures, but rather as tentative guidelines or example to help you understand the great variation of nonverbal behavior in humans. First, kinesis is the by some to be the richest nonverbal code in terms of its power to communicate meaning. Kinesis include most of the behaviors we use associated with nonverbal communication. Second, facial expression communicate an endless stream of emotion, and we make judgment about what the other are feeling by assessing the faces. Our use of emotion to communicate attitudes and emotion in electronic media testifies to the importance of this type of kinesis. Third, eye contact is less common and generally less appropriate, whereas lack of eye contact in Asia is often a sign of respect and considered polite. Then gestures are arm and hand movements used for communication. There are at least 4 different kinds of gestures that we should consider. emblems, illustrated, regulators, and adapters. Illustrated or emblematic nonverbal communication are a nonverbal gesture used to communicate our message effectively and reinforces our points. Your grandfather may describe the fish is the ass catch and hold up his two hands 36 inches apart to illustrate exactly as big the fish was. Regulated are nonverbal message which control, maintain, or discourage interaction. Adapters help us feel comfortable or indicate emotions or moods. An adapter call involves you meeting your need for security by playing with your hair or, for example, or huggies yourself for warmth. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum to Puan Siti Nur binti Adnan. My name is Nur Syafiqah binti Muhammadul Karunai. Number metric 10 DPM 19F 2077. I would like to talk about conversation distance. Okay, unconsciously, we all keep comfortable distance around us when we interact with other people. This distance has had several names over the years, including personal space, interpersonal distance, comfort zone, and body bubble. This space between us and another person forms invisible walls that define how comfortable we feel at various distance from other people. Other than that, the amount of space change depending on the nature of relationship. For example, we are usually more comfortable standing closer to our family than strangers. The personality also determines that the size of the area with which we are comfortable when talking to people. Culture style are important too. Japanese employers and employee usually stand further apart while talking than their American counterparts. The Latin Americans and Arabs tend to stand closer and Americans do when talking. Other than that, the usual distance in social conversation ranges from about an arm's length to 4 feet. Less space in the American culture may be associated with either greater intimacy or aggressive behavior. The common practice of saying "excuse me" for the slightest accidental touching of another person reveals how much uncomfortable Americans are if people get too close. Thus, a person whose space has been intruded upon by another may feel treated and react defensively in cultures where close physical contact is acceptable and even desirable. Americans may be perceived as cold and distant. For Americans, culture does not always determine the message of non-verbal communication. The individual's personality and context and the relationship also influence its meaning. However, like verbal language, non-verbal language is linked to person culture background. People are generally comfortable with others who have body language similar to their own. On research study demonstrated that when British graduate students imitate some Arab patterns of non-verbal behavior, making increased eyes contact, smiling, and direct facing their Arab partners. The Arabs felt that these students were more likable and trustworthy than most of the other British students. When one person's non-verbal language matches that of another, there is increased comfort in non-verbal communication across cultures that there are similarities and differences. Whether we choose the former of the latter, the silent language is much louder than it first appears. Thank you.